Welcome to the Science of Jaws here at Comicon 2016. My name is Joe Fortunato, and let me introduce our panel here. And I'm going to read the bios because I'm not skilled enough to memorize all of this. I will start with our special guest of honor here on my left, Carl Gottlieb. Carl is a screenwriter, actor, comedian, and executive. He's best known for co-writing the screenplay of Jaws, as well as directing the 1981 low-budget cult film, Caveman. I don't like to call it a cult film, it's an awesome film. But
yeah, it's a studio film.
I'm going from your bio. He began writing comedy for TV, contributing to the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, which he won an Emmy Award in 1969. Bob Newhart, All in the Family, Odd Couple. His acting roles include MASH by Robert Altman, Clueless. He also co-wrote David Crosby's two autobiographies, 1989's A Long Time Gone and 2006 Since Then. Gottlieb was hired as an actor to appear as Harry Meadows, the editor of the local newspaper in Jaws. He was hired by his friend Steven Spielberg to redraft the script. Ironically, his redrafts reduced the role of Meadows, so still appear in several scenes. He wrote the popular book, The Jaws Log, which I actually assigned to my students at school, about the notoriously difficult production, some of which we'll discuss tonight and a little bit here today. He also wrote Jaws 2 and co-wrote the screenplays for The Jerk and Jaws 3D.
If I was a Jeopardy question, it would be, his hits begin with a J.
Our next guest, and I'm going sort of out of order here just because I have it on the list, Dr. Miles Orchinik. Dr. Orchinik is a neurobiologist. I'm post-dating you already, that's very odd. In the School of Life Sciences at Arizona State University. He has studied stress, particularly the effects of stress hormones on brain function, for 25 years. He received his undergraduate degree of history before discovering his passion for understanding the mechanism through which hormones influence behavior. He received his PhD in behavioral neuroendocrinology at Oregon State University, and continued his trainings as a postdoc at the Rockefeller University before joining ASU in 1995. He has over 50 publications and received numerous awards. Please welcome Miles Orchinik. Next on our illustrious panel is Amanda Mozilo. Amanda is a biologist specializing in marine ecosystems and conservation education as a graduate of Arizona State University. There's a theme going here, where she has enjoyed using her educational experience in biological science to make lasting impact in local communities through science education. Through her work with Sea Life Arizona and the Arizona Science Center, Amanda has had the opportunity to participate in community outreach through development of educational programming, public and private events. She particularly treasures the opportunity she had to ignite passions in others for conserving the environment around them, and in turn making a difference in oceans throughout the world through initiatives such as canal and lake cleanups and the Sea Life Green Team in both Tempe and DFW, and partnering with the Girl Scouts of America to head recycling drives. Please welcome Amanda Mozilo. This is weirdly awkward to read my own bio, but my name is Joe Fortunato. I'm originally from Akron, Ohio. I began my entertainment career as a research assistant at the Today Show. I graduated from Yale University and went to Los Angeles, where I worked in the entertainment industry for about 15 years, notably with Murphy Brown creator Diane English, where before that I worked in ABC children's programming and NBC movies for television. I segued into writing, and I'm like you, a Writers Guild member, where I worked on a situation comedy that no one saw that Diane put together, and I was a writer for. I've also co-written several TV pilots and a feature film that was developed at Disney. After my Hollywood career, I came to discover, if you will, education, and I shifted into education, and I've been at Arizona State as a film and screenwriting professor for the last 8 years. I'm currently working on a PhD, and I'm specializing in the study of Steven Spielberg, as you might guess, and that's what my dissertation is going to be, and I won't bore you with the rest. So welcome all of our panelists here.
Yeah.
This is my dog Brody, if I need more bona fides. His name is Brody, and you can actually guess where he got the name. And that is my home, which should also tell you I'm the right person for this panel. I'm going to say a few brief words about the film. I'm going to keep them very brief because I know we have a lot to go over here. And I prepared so much material, so I'm going to skip through a lot because I know you guys have questions. We have a great panel, and I want to get to everybody. Jaws, as most of you know, sort of ushered in the blockbuster, the contemporary blockbuster era of Hollywood that's still with us. It was the first film to reach $100 million in box office, and it redefined movie marketing. Here's some great shots of lines. It's still the number 7. It's still in the top 10 highest grossing films of all time, adjusted for inflation. That's the real box office. So Jaws is in the top 10 still, which makes my heart feel good. And probably yours too, Carl. Spielberg was 27 years old when he directed the film. It started with an original budget of about $3.5 million and, shall we say, ballooned to closer to 12. It was unique in its marketing material in that it opened on what was then a lot of screens, over 400 screens, almost 500. Now it's not uncommon at all for a film to open on 4,000 screens. So at the time, though, this was a very unique methodology for opening a film, and a lot of television as well. Just some tip of the hat to some of the people that brought the film to us. There is Carl and Peter Benchley, who wrote the novel. Zanuck and Brown, the producers of the film. Of course, our 3 main actors. And of course, designing the shark, Bruce. So why don't we start there? And you're going to hear here from Joe Alves, who talks about designing Bruce.
It was the film's title monster, a 12-ton hydraulic shark that would become affectionately known as Bruce, that plagued Spielberg and the Jaws production team with their most daunting set of complications.
Once the idea was set that we were going to build it, then we had to determine the size. And I was working off of a scale model of my research of a shark that was about 12.5 feet. And so I just doubled it because I felt that as the sharks got bigger, they got girthier and they weren't so attractive. So I figured a 25-foot shark would be the proper size.
And there is Joe and Bob Matty, who helped create the shark and who worked on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the squid. So I'll start there. Carl, do you want to share any stories of Bruce the shark and its production? Happy or sad?
The legend is that the shark wasn't working, and we had to shoot everything else. And then I got to go home because all the dialogue was finished, and there was just another 2.5 months of going out to sea and getting 3 seconds of usable film a day, and sometimes none. But Joe is understandably defensive. He said, "Look, it was an amazing feat just to build the shark from nothing to having this functioning piece of equipment within a year, and it was never tested in salt water. It was tested in fresh water, but it wasn't until we got it into the salt water of Nantucket Sound that we realized that salt water eats everything." And anything that was electrical was, forget that. We couldn't use electrical circuits, so the shark was mostly operated by hydraulics and air hoses. And the famous shot where you first see the shark appear, and right after the laugh line, Brody says, "You've got to come down here and chum some of this shit," and then the shark appears. On the original production track, because they roll sound on everything, you can hear, clank, whir, bang. Get the eyes, somebody get the eyes, make sure the eyes are working. Yes, get the double check the, oh, yes, it's working, okay, now go, ready with the shark, going, all right, let me see the shark, no, hold it, all right, now go, shh. In the film, it's but if you listen very carefully to the soundtrack, you will hear a fragment of the original soundtrack, which is actually an air hose giving way. It goes, shh, but it comes out like a hiss from the shark. So it appears subliminally like a venomous creature. It's just an air hose going, shh. And it survived all the sound mixes. So when you watch the film, you'll be able to spot that. It's also the shark's dying sound as the shark sinks into the sea. You'll hear a strange echoing bellow, which Stephen first used in his movie Duel, when the truck went over the cliff he needed some amplified, something to exaggerate the sound of this horrible truck going to its death. And he found from a Universal 1930s dinosaur movie, he found a bellow of a dinosaur that the sound department had created in the 30s. That's in there. And when the shark sinks into the ocean, you will also hear like a dinosaur bellow from the 1930s, subtly mixed in.
That's the kind of thing we'll point out tonight at our screening. Actually, that begs the question, and right off the bat, we're off script. I had learned, whether I'm correct or not, and Amanda, I'm asking you, that the hiss that Carl described, that's a result of mechanics, was actually not that far off, because that when a shark opens its mouth to bite, assuming it's not underwater, there is a rush of air. Is that accurate?
It would be accurate for pretty much any animal that would come up and open their mouth over or outside of the water. So it's not too far off having that hiss. Whether it took place underwater or above water would be the debatable part.
Yeah.
Sharks do make some kinds of sounds, however, usually they're not usually in our range of hearing that we can understand. You might be able to detect it with high-tech equipment and such, but you wouldn't usually hear too many bellowings coming out of a shark.
In those, there's some wonderful footage from Cape Town, South Africa, of sharks leaving the water to grab seals out of. Probably the seals could hear them.
Oh, I'm
probably,
sure.
Probably the last thing the seal heard.
That would be a very terrifying.
And as Joe found out when he was doing his research, the longer sharks get, the fatter they get. So a 25, the studio originally wanted to double the 16-foot, because they wanted to go to 30 feet. And Joe said a 30-foot shark is going to be as big as a Buick in the middle. It's not going to look graceful or dangerous. It's going to look like it's just a big, fat, mean fish. So he laid out on a floor in a sound stage 35 feet, 25 feet, and 16 feet. And he brought the executives in and said, this is 16 foot. This is what normally is out there. And they said, no, that's too small. And then he showed them 35 feet, and they said, oh, that's kind of grotesque. That's too big. And Joe knew that they would go, like the three bears. They're too hot, too cold, just right, 25 feet. And he slimmed it down. Our 25-foot shark the Jaws shark is much more supple and slender than a real shark of that length.
He's on the paleo diet, right?
Yeah.
Well, you tee up this clip very, very nicely.
I sent the galleys of the book to Ron and Valerie Taylor in Australia a year ahead of shooting, and I told them to read it, and I would be coming down in a couple of weeks to talk about possibly shooting some live shark footage. And here's the foremost great white shark experts in the world at that time. And my own cynical Hollywood viewpoint of the book was that the shark wasn't a real shark, it was super shark. I mean, it did everything. And it stretched credibility for me. And when I finally got the courage up to ask Ron Taylor, what do you think of the book? His response was, and this is almost verbatim, he said, I don't know who this guy Peter Benchley is, but he sure does know great whites, because everything in the book could happen. And the hair went up on the back of my neck.
And they're talking about Ron and Valerie Taylor, who shot the live shark footage that's integrated into the film. Amanda, agree or dispute with these things could happen?
From a biology standpoint, a lot of the actions that the shark shows in the movie Jaws are pretty on cue with what a great white would do in the wild. Sometimes you'll see the test bumps to just kind of know something, and then they'll come back for a bite. They may come back for another bite. The number of people who've actually been eaten by great whites is disputably low, so maybe not so accurate there. However, I would not put it past a great white to try anybody once. Generally, it is just a test bite. Unfortunately, that mouth is so big that test bite's probably going to be the only one that you get. So, not too far off in the movie. I think a lot of the I guess where people would try and dispute it would come from what people watching the movie make it out to be, and walk away with it as like great whites are man-eaters, which is not so true. So.
Yeah, they eat everything. They're like tiger sharks. They eat everything. There's a very funny scene in the film where they're eviscerating the tiger shark, and he throws a license plate, a paint can and a license plate, a Louisiana license plate, and says, "I must have come up with the Gulf Current."
Oh yeah, they found tires, license plates, a horse's head. They found all kinds of things inside of sharks before. So it's really not that
There, I've got
far-fetched.
it queued up. Look at these guys, they're just making it dance, making it sing. And Miles, I promise we are going to get to fear here in a moment here. We're just talking a little bit biology.
I was afraid you might not get to it.
Our neurosciences are tingling. A moment ago, a clip I just kind of went over, but they talk about rogue sharks and rogue behavior. They stay in an area while the feeding is good. Is that an accurate theory, or has that been debunked?
I don't necessarily think it's been debunked. A shark's going to stay where food's easiest to get. They are opportunistic hunters, so if something's easy to get, they're going to take advantage of it. With that being said, they're also going to take advantage of higher populations because you'll probably run into higher populations of injured or sick animals, whether they think it's a human on a surfboard or a fish in a school of fish or a seal swimming above. They take advantage of those weaklings, and they actually have special senses that can help determine when an animal is struggling in the water. They have two specific organs, the ampullae of Lorenzini and a lateral line, that helps detect different electrical impulses through the water that are given off by animals. Anyone who has a nerve in their body will be giving off an electrical impulse. So animals that are struggling tend to give off a different level of impulses that sharks can detect. So if there's going to be a high population of animals, specifically a high population that may have some weaklings or injured or sick animals, they'll probably stay
Much
around
like
and
this
take away
room.
that. That's right. Thank goodness we're in the desert.
Jaws fans a lot of times have the question. There's a scene where there's panic on the beach and Brody's yelling, "No whistles, no whistles," and people, why no whistles? And I'm told that's because the shark can hear or sense the whistles. I don't know if that's spin or not. But.
You know, I'm sure sharks can hear a lot of different frequencies. They have a level of frequency that they can detect that ranges much farther than the human ear can hear. I'm not sure how accurate a whistle would, or the fact that a whistle would aggravate a shark more is. Any commotion will aggravate though, so running through the water, any very loud, low droning sounds tend to attract animals of the ocean, whether it's a shark or a whale. They tend to rely on those lower frequency sonars, so they'll hear those and come to that. But I'm not positive about a high-pitched whistle.
Carl, did you ever hear why that line was in there, or is
Nope.
that something?
It's a mystery.
So it's a mystery. By the way, while we're talking the size of the shark, I brought with me a little audio-visual. This is a mold. It's a copy, obviously, but this is the original, one of the original molds of the teeth from Bruce that we saw a moment ago. And you can see it's got a peg here for. My collectible just became more valuable. But that is, yeah, so, you know, a tooth the size of a shot glass, as Hooper is fond of saying. It's not quite there, but this is, I believe, the second biggest mold that they had.
And what I wanted to...
We talked about that already. Let's start some psychological stuff.
Right. Summer girl goes swimming.
That is
On
Carl.
the floor. She tires. Fishing boat comes along. It's happened before. I don't think you appreciate the gut reaction people have to these things.
Harry, I appreciate it. I'm just reacting to what I was told.
Martin, it's all psychological. You yell barracuda. Everybody says, huh? What? You yell shark. We've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
So, Miles, what induces panic at the thought of a shark? Or that's a big, broad question, and we can go deeper than that. But
Well, it's actually kind of interesting. We seem to have these innate fears of particularly animals. And so in some studies, they have looked at responses, emotional responses, and sometimes they do brain imaging while they're doing it. And they show a series of animals, and some of them look really benign, but an area of the brain called the amygdala, which is involved in fear, is activated when people look at animals. There's one study I looked at, one of the control slides they showed was Steven Spielberg, and people did not react that way to Steven Spielberg. So, I mean, it really appears to be kind of innate. Sharks weren't included in the studies I've seen, but spiders are very good at eliciting these kinds of responses.
I've recently, thanks to the nature channels and all this, I have never been a fan of the odder creatures and all the science fiction monsters going to H.R. Geiger's Alien, which was a terrifying creature, seem to have their roots in these things that live at enormous depths in the sea, which are the weirdest and scariest looking creatures I've ever seen. Warm-blooded mammals, okay, we're kind of all related, we're all kind of mammals. We're probably gorillas are kind of like big, hairy people. But the fishier and more primitive and the more into the water creatures you go, you realize they live in a very different world than we do, and that's frightening, isn't it?
Yeah, into the unknown,
Yeah.
the deep, dark unknown, is one of the almost archetypical fears.
Yeah.
Well, again, you guys are so good at teeing up clips. The next one is called Primal Fear. So let's take a look.
I think the reason it went around the world so quickly was that you don't even need dialogue. I mean, you just see the situation there, and your own primal fear about something you can't see into is enough to hold your interest in that movie.
It's a universal movie, and not just Universal Studios, but it really has a global impact. I really think it works like a silent movie. You're responding to the visuals instinctively in a visceral way.
So how accurate is, it's a matter of opinion, I suppose, Miles, but primal fear? Why are we afraid of things that we can't see?
Well, I think that goes to a really fundamental aspect of our brain processing, and that has to do with determining which events or which objects we see that we can control. When things are uncontrollable or unpredictable, they're very stressful for us, and it's a really fundamental kind of really, it's a very primitive kind of response. You see it in rat studies. I mean, rats are very good at determining what's controllable and what's not. And actually, this gets into a lot of what happens during movie watching, so I don't want to get too carried away. But in terms of being exposed to, I thought the scariest part of the movie was when the sharks weren't seen. The music's going and you don't see the shark. That really got me more than seeing the model of the shark. So I think he's got something there about the unknown that we just can't control. We can't predict what's going to happen.
Well, I'll follow up with this because, again, you guys are teeing me up so beautifully here. And Carl, you might have a story to share on this. But we'll get to questions in just a moment, so don't forget what you have to. Let's throw caution to the wind.
It's an apex predator that you know is out there somewhere, and you never know when it's going to strike. What's not to fear?
Very true, very true. So it actually begs the question, as I'm going further off script, would if we saw a shark on Fifth Avenue in our element, would it be less scary?
If it was alive and snapping, sure.
I kept the question broad, Carl.
We should start looking for the Comicon convention.
Is it cosplay or is it going to kill me?
But in terms of filmmaking technique, Spielberg and his many artists create fear by watching the movie, as you kind of said. And here's Bill Butler, who's the director of photography for Jaws. And he I don't know if he created or further developed, and Carl, you can speak to that, what we call the water box. And Spielberg's goal here was to get the camera at water level, even dip below it. It's essentially the same viewpoint that we see when we're treading water in the film. And that sort of leads to the fear. And Miles, what does that trigger in us?
Well, it depends on the time frame, really. So it's good to distinguish, I think, between fear and anxiety. And some of the stress is closely related to that. Fear is something that's very directed towards an event or an object, and it's typically short-lived, except for people with phobias. Whereas anxiety, I think, is a longer-term consequence, a longer term process that we see when there seems to be a risk of losing a lot. Fear is more immediate and really more primitive. Anxiety requires brain processing to a greater extent, and how much do we have to lose, I think, is a component of anxiety. And we know that there are different brain regions involved in fear versus anxiety. And in a film, I think that's filmmakers do both things. So when a shark jumps up onto the boat, or when the figure comes out of from the submerged boat, that's a real fear response. Boom, 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 boom. You know, at least your heart starts going, your sympathetic nervous system is activated. You know, we call that the fight or flight. You're getting energy to get the hell out of there. But anxiety is something that sort of pervades the whole movie. Is something going to happen to these people? For
Carl,
me,
I'm
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I just thought one of the biggest anxieties I had about were they ever going to convince the town leaders to do something, or were they going to go? Boy, that was stressful for me.
It defies. Well, you're an academic, and it defies logic that they would, pursue economic gain over the safety of the community.
They need summer dollars.
Well, when we were writing the film, we would, would joke that it was a combination of Moby Dick and Enemy of the People, which is the two literary archetypes for the dilemmas in Jaws. And the fear and anxiety, fear, we've kind of become, especially you guys who are fans of horror films and the whole genre, the fear response is fairly manipulable by the filmmaker. You have something enters the frame from an unexpected angle, or appears in the foreground, or those are triggers that are hardwired in our amygdala that go, whoa, fear. It's like walking in the jungle, and here a tiger steps out from behind a tree. You go, oh shit. The most effective horror.
It's a very calm response to a shark. A tiger, actually.
The most successful horror films are films that create anxiety, which is an enduring state for the whole running time of the film. And in the AFI list of the 100 best horror films of all time, Jaws is number 2 and Psycho is number 1. And for the same reason, there's a horrendous murder early in the film, a horrendous death. Chrissy in Jaws and Janet Leigh, who nobody in the audience expects to die because she's a movie star. And we know she's a star, and she's in this Hitchcock movie, so we're expecting her to live at least, to the 4th reel or so, and she just, she gets horribly killed. So once that fear reaction has been elicited from the audience to begin with, now you've got 90 more minutes where you can prey on their anxiety and say, who else is going to get killed? How are they going to get killed? And in Jaws, because the shark was a mechanical thing that was difficult to operate and created problems, Stephen and I both were familiar with a movie called The Thing, not John Carpenter's The Thing, but the original The Thing, which is an old black and white horror film from the 50s.
Was it Hawks?
Howard Hawks, yeah. And in which you don't see the thing until 50 minutes into the movie, but you're terrified all the way through because they use a Geiger counter as a device to indicate that it's somewhere nearby. They're in an ice station. For those of you who don't know, the thing takes place in an ice station where a creature has been thawed from the ice and comes to life and is eating, destroying people, and they don't know where the next attack is coming from, and it's a closed environment like the spaceship in Alien, and Alien 2. There's this thing out there, and which for children it's the monster under the bed or in the closet. And if you can convince an audience that it's there and might even be in the theater, then it becomes an experience that the daylight cures. I mean, you leave the theater and you go, it's like waking from a nightmare. Oh God, that's over. Boy, did I enjoy the fear. It was like a roller coaster. You know, it's a controllable thing. It's not like a real psychopath with a knife. It's just, you know, oh, it's just a movie. But the most successful ones have this lasting effect.
Well, let's take go ahead, Nat.
No, go.
Okay.
Go.
Let's take a
I
quick
go
look
on
at a
forever.
clip here. I wish we had 4 hours to do this, but the famous opening scene of the film, and we're not going to see the whole film, but just I want some, you know, an amalgamation of both the fear in our brains as well as skilled filmmaking. Look at this shot here. We're seeing something from below. We, as an audience, can look at this and say something that we can't see or something that Chrissy can't see is about ready to attack. And of course, John Williams' music probably adds to the psychology of that. And you know, there's the water level again from below. We have the dark, we have the music, all these things coming together. And Carl, you can tell me if this is accurate or not, but I've seen them, but I understand that the storyboards were drawn up for the opening where the shark is seen, and because Bruce wasn't working for much of it, they opted to go with the tug and pull of Chrissy.
Yeah, when using the shark became problematic, we made a conscious decision to show the effects of the shark, which would be just as terrifying, in fact, more terrifying, because you're not seeing explicitly what's happening to Chrissy. I mean, horror films now, they show everything. They have, you know, the special effects, the replicas of entrails and, you know, beating hearts, and just, you know, all the creations of special effects guys, which are you know, horribly graphic, and yet you know, compared to like 3 snapshots from Fallujah in the war in Afghanistan, will disabuse you of the notion of special effects, because anybody who's been out there can tell you it's much worse. Real life is much more horrible. But we figured, since we couldn't do that effectively, and we didn't want to really, we could achieve the same anxiety in the audience and the same fear level by preying on the unknown, which is why you have the 2 guys, you know, with the breakaway dock. You know, no shark anywhere around. Yeah.
Look how prepared I am.
And it all worked. And the one comment that I've heard for now 41 years is, whenever I'm introduced to anyone, you know, Carl wrote Jaws, and then they say, my new friend will say, you know, because of that movie, I didn't go in the water for, I didn't swim for, I didn't go in my swimming pool, I didn't take a bath. I mean, people's phobias were reinforced by that film. And I, you know, I have no fear of sharks, but I don't like deep water. I mean, I don't swim in the bottomless ocean. There's an old sailor joke, you know, even on an Atlantic crossing, you're never more than a couple, 3 miles from land. It's just straight down, that's all.
You know, the irony of that is, and I'm certainly one of the millions who was afraid to do this, that, or the other after seeing Jaws, and I was 7 when I saw Jaws. I will confess to this day that if I'm in a pool by myself, I'm thinking about it. And that's irrational as it comes, because now somehow I feel safe if someone else is in the pool, because, you know, that family of people at the other end of the pool is miraculously going to save me from this mythical shark that's in the pool. But I do want to throw some love out to Verna Fields, who, along with Steven Spielberg, created so much of that tension of what we didn't see with the yellow barrels and the dock and such like that. Miles, I think you wanted to say something about about the music and the clip we just saw,
Oh, the music.
or go off on a tangent.
Yeah, no. Well, I did want to follow up on something that Carl said, but when my lab found out that I was going to be here at Comicon, well, they thought I was so cool, but they also one of my students sent me this clip, which was from it's on YouTube. It's Breaking Bad, which I'm not very familiar with, but it was a very tense scene. And they ran a soundtrack with it that was a canned laughter from a sitcom, and completely changed your experience of the film. So of the clip. So I think the music here is particularly important.
Yeah, music obviously is a primal language. For all we know, rhythm is related to fetal heartbeat. I mean, it's that basic in our systems, and composers have created themes that evoke, surprise and shock and anxiety and happiness, and that's just the Western canon. That's just our 400, 500-year history of civilized music. But all cultures have music that creates or amplifies emotions, and it's a great shorthand. It's a great and there's enormous amount of work to be done on how music
Absolutely.
and emotions and fears, how you can amplify and make things resonate by using music and sound too. There's the high-pitched shrieking that Bernard Herrmann used in Psycho. It's probably a soundtrack recording of a seagull, but mixed in with the knife strikes and the music and the shower sounds, it becomes horrible. And now, you can go da-dum, da-dum, and people know exactly what you're talking about. Or if you go, that's equally terrifying. And just because a group of collaborative artists, musician, editor, sound editor, filmmaker, screenwriter, put those elements together in ways that hit us in profound ways.
I teach a large intro-level film class at ASU, and the first thing I say to open the semester is, film is light and sound coming together to create emotion. And that is it. That is it, in a nutshell. And we spend billions and billions of dollars to create light and sound coming together to create emotion. But that's, at its core, what film is. And for part of the history, it wasn't even sound, although we had piano players and stuff in the hall. Amanda, I want to kind of circle back around to the clip we just saw with Chrissy's death, or take that as a jumping off point or not. How accurate, or what, describe the process of a shark attack? Obviously, in the scene, the shark is coming up from below. What is a typical, if there is such a thing, attack?
Well, we talked about that just as the scene was happening.
Yeah, we actually just pointed out the couple things we were talking about earlier, how there was first the bump where she kind of feels something and looks around like, what was that? And then there was the initial bite where she gets pulled down a little bit. And then he comes back and latches on and she gets dragged around. Now, it's not uncommon for the predatory sharks to thrash their prey because it's hard to eat living prey. It's much easier to eat something that's already dead. So you will see them catch a seal and nab it and thrash it so that it dies while they're eating. So they're not having to battle it going all the way down because that's not very comfortable.
You don't want to have to fight your food.
And
You'd like it just to sit there on the plate, right?
Exactly.
So these big apex predators that we're so afraid of, they're picking the low-hanging fruit here as much as possible.
They're really, if you want to look at it this way, they're pretty lazy hunters. They have all these really awesome adaptations that make them excellent hunters, but it's excellent for finding things that let them be pretty lazy. So they're going to look for something that's the easiest for them to catch. And unfortunately, she was that for that day. So.
In Africa, I was on one of those photo safaris in the bush, seeing all the creatures of the wild. And there's a thing called a Thompson's gazelle, which has a kind of a unique marking, like a white-tailed deer. Like a white-tailed deer, they have almost like golden arches in white fur. And Thompson's gazelles are referred to by the guides and hunters as fast food because they run like crazy, but the slower or the weaker ones are the ones that the tigers and the jaguars and the apex predators can outrun You know, because you always go for the weakest member of the thing first. Which is why, you know, the smart water buffalo kind of form a circle with the horns out and the babies on the interior, because they're doing their survival thing. But you're right, the big predators, they prefer it if, you know, don't fight, just, you know, surrender, just let me eat you, you know.
Give up already, you're not gonna make it.
It's God's way. It's God's way.
Can I take advantage of having a mic and ask a question?
Absolutely. We're going to turn this over to questions now anyway, so you can lead us on.
There was mentioned in the film that these great whites liked to hunt in shallow water. Is that really true?
Yeah.
So the majority of shark bites actually happen in waist deep or lower. Generally, though, they don't necessarily put those as an attack necessarily. It's more of they might call it an unprovoked attack, but it might be you're in my area and you stepped on me, or you brushed my fin and I didn't like that type thing. Attacks tend to be a little bit more like in the surf area, where you might be paddling out on a paddleboard and look more like a seal. That's not an unprovoked attack. It is actually a hunting pattern, but it's a mistaken identity most of the time.
Yeah,
which is why you see
wetsuits
bites.
look like seals. A wetsuit makes you look like a seal, and the first bite is neoprene, and sharks, you know, don't like neoprene, so that's why a lot of surfers have survived shark attacks, because the shark goes, this is not lunch. You know?
Well, I was actually that's my one and only experience with a shark live, is that I was in Manhattan Beach and I was wading through the waters, and I stepped on I believe it was a sand shark, but I'm not sure, but it was probably about as big as my dog Brody. But I didn't care because I just stepped on a shark and I freaked out, as did the shark, by the way. But yeah, it was exactly that.
Yeah.
Since we're sort of winding down to the back end of this, why don't we open it up for questions? And already we're probably not going to get to everybody. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Mr. Gottlieb, because I'm a shark conservationist, and your portrayal of Matt Hooper is what got me to want to pursue it. You also got me one of my first kisses when Ben Gardner's head pops out of the boat and my girlfriend jumped in my lap. But the question I wanted to ask is, and I know Peter Benchley works a lot with shark conservation at the end, what would you change? And knowing what you know now about great whites and sharks specifically, what would you change, if anything, in the movie?
Peter was perpetually dismayed by the after effects of the film, and he spent the last third of his life actively trying to make up to the shark population of the world for this irrational fear that had been created, that people started killing sharks for sport, and there's a horrible habit by the East Asians, especially the Japanese, for just cutting the fins off the shark and then throwing the whole fish back in the water, minus a fin, which is essentially a death sentence. And Peter tried to make the world aware of sharks' role in the environment and their importance as apex predators, and the fact that we know so little about them. And to this day, we don't know that much. It's hard, you know, they're hard to tag, they're hard to follow. They have demonstrated enormous range. I mean, sharks that have been tagged in one part of the world will turn up thousands of miles elsewhere. So, yeah, I mean, Peter was, like you said, he couldn't control it, what happened, the public fear. I mean, I guess it's, you know, kind of in a way like, you know, like who knew that when we were watching Celebrity Apprentice, that guy might be running for president? So we do what we can.
Let's go over there.
Yeah, the shark teeth.
Regenerate.
Yeah, so sharks have up to like 7 rows of teeth depending on the species, and basically the way it lays is it's a set that stands up, one that retracts a little bit more and more and more and more all the way back to the last set. So as one falls out, another moves forward. They have to be prepared to catch a meal at any time because they can go weeks without eating in the wild. So if they end up with a bunch of missing teeth, they're going to end up like no dentures and can't eat anything that they find. So their teeth actually replenish pretty darn quickly. You'll see ragged teeth because if the tooth hasn't fallen out or hasn't been forced out, it'll stay there. I'm assuming if it just becomes too much, if that tooth were to hit a bone, it would probably push the tooth out and another one would move forward. You'll see if you look inside shark mouths, because of the way that the teeth are, you can see crossing teeth and weird spaces between sharks' teeth. You'll see different shaped teeth on this, depending on the species. Like bull sharks, I believe, have 2 different types of teeth on the top and bottom based on what kind of prey they tend to hunt.
And keep in mind,
So-
sorry, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
keep in mind, this is a still frame here. This is literally a few seconds of footage. Do you want to finish up on that, Amanda?
That's about it. So, I mean, you'd probably see some broken ragged teeth, but they probably wouldn't be there for very long.
I'm going to try and get as many questions as I can. The hand going up whose face I cannot see. Yes, you.
This question was Miles. Psychologically, I was curious, especially on Jaws. There's a difference between anxiety, fear, and then phobia, which basically happened because of this movie. I was brought up in the area as Jersey Shore, that's it, special somewhere. And the movie came out, and I never was a thing. Then I met other people. It went from fear, and then it didn't fear, and it went to phobia. How does that progression work?
You know,
Just to repeat for those who didn't hear, if I'm getting the gist of your question, how does it progress from a fear to a phobia?
From leaving the theater, and then it becomes phobia.
yeah, you know, I'm, excuse me, I don't think that there's a progression from fear to a phobia. I think phobia is a tendency that occurs independent of any experience with the object.
Most people that don't eat sharks,
Most people don't,
don't see a shark, I mean, down next to you.
right, but they're,
You don't meet them very often.
right, so most people are not phobic. I mean, phobic is sort of an irrational, uncontrollable fear that can interfere with your life. It's not just a normal fear of sharks. So being in the water with on the Jersey Shore, worrying about sharks is not the same as being phobic.
So it's still the fear of the movies is following through that.
Well, it's an interesting question. You know, it probably depends how old you were. And Joe brought this up when you saw the movie, because a lot of what we do, the brain imaging studies show, is when we watch horror films, there's way more attention towards in your visual cortex. So if you look at people looking at horror films versus neutral films, they're paying way more attention to what they're seeing. And then what's activated, which was a big surprise to people, is not the amygdala, but it's regions of the brain like the prefrontal cortex that are involved in judgments, in assessing controllability, making decisions. And that part of the brain protects us during watching horror films, but it's not well developed at all in children. I mean, this is sort of a famous thing now, you know, in young men, it's not, you know, doesn't develop till they're 45 or something. But, you know, it is, you know, late in adolescence before that area is fully myelinated and fully functional. So there's a big difference in the response to films depending on how old you are.
I would add too, and Carl, you might want to speak to this. As a writer, the power of storytelling certainly exacerbates that. I mean, you know, when I was 7 years old and seeing Jaws, I was old enough at 7 to understand that this was lights on a screen, but the power of storytelling, you know, made me afraid to go into the bathtub that night. And that's what fascinated me. And that's why I'm here today, because Jaws changed my life. I said, that's what I want to do. I want to tell stories that move people.
Well, I think the history of civilization, I mean, I'm starting a book called Sapiens, which is a wonderful study of how we came to be who we are, going back tens of thousands of years in evolution. The narrative form, one of the things that we do, along with a surprisingly large number of species that weren't, you know, this wasn't theory 50 years ago. But as it turns out, all kinds of other animals cooperate and share knowledge and information in different ways. But the power of human beings, one of the reasons for our triumph as the apex predators on the planet. Besides our normal strength, I mean, we can outrun a horse over time. I mean, there's a lot of things that humans can do that are surprising, just measured in
That would
animal-
surprise me if I could do that.
in animal terms. As a matter of fact, it's a famous bar bet. You can outrace a horse on a 100-yard course there and back. You can win a bet by betting you can beat a horse in a race if you go out to 100 yards and come back. And the reason for that is the human can turn on a dime and come back. The horse gets to the 100-yard mark and has to come around. and the local Apache Indians knew that if they ran long enough, the cavalry couldn't catch them because the horses would founder and die, and the humans could keep on going. Humans can eat while they're moving. They can gestate and reproduce and socialize 3 generations at the same time. We just have a whole lot of skills. But the skill of narrative, the thing is going back to the first grunts of buffalo. You go there, I wait here, we drive him over the cliff, we all eat for a week. That kind of knowledge, and then telling the story to the younger members of the tribe so that when it's their turn to go out and hunt the buffalo, this is how they do it. And narrative is this, all of what we as storytellers do is basically share narratives that enable us to thrive, prosper, survive, and avoid disaster. And sometimes we're good at it, sometimes we're not. And sometimes a false narrative is extremely damaging because, if you can't tell that it's a false narrative, you give it the same weight that you give the truth, and then you make life-threatening choices based on false narratives.
We only have a few minutes left, sadly, so I want to go into the lightning round here and get a rapid-fire question and answer for you.
Gold medal star I've ever seen come here. Real quick, on a creative level, as a writer myself, your contributions that you did to the script, have you ever seen or something that carried over into the film that you specifically wrote, whether it be dialogue, description, that Stephen translated so well that when you watch the film, you say, that's my work, that's my line, that's what I did.
Yes.
What's your part?
There's a scene without words where Quint notices that the fishing line has tension on it. And it's a reel with a ratchet on it. So you hear click, 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 click. And then he's hooking himself up. He knows ahead of all the other characters what's about to happen. And he hitches himself to the chair, and as he gets himself settled, Brody says, hey, I got the knot, and at the same time, the shark hits the line. That was described. I told Stephen, what would be nice, what would be suspenseful is if we did click, click, click. And Stephen said, write it down. And I wrote it down, and then he shot it, and he added, Quint hooking himself in. But that moment of an inanimate object, a fishing reel, telling us that the shark is right outside the door. That was the piece of stuff. And most people would attribute that to the director. That was a written moment. Now, he created many moments as a director that I had nothing to do with as a writer, but that one, to answer your question, was written and photographed.
Thank you.
Really quick for the biologist. If I were to swim with a ham or a mackerel,
A ham or a mackerel?
If I were
Okay.
or anything, any meat, if I were to give that to the shark as I was swimming, would it take that as an offering and leave me alone?
I haven't tried it myself, but if you want to try it and you survive, get back to me on that. I'm not sure that their social awareness is that highly elevated to accept that as a peace offering, but let me know what your results are.
I think you'd more likely get say, thank you, may I have another?
He might take your hand because it tastes like mackerel too.
I see a cluster of hands there, and I can see you first still.
To
One of the publicity materials that's out there is a little placard that they used to put in the lobby called Shark Facts. That was the distillation of what we knew then from research. That Leonard Campagno, who was the oceanographer, the ichthyologist, I guess, and consultant on the movie. There's one of the hardest things to do in screenwriting is exposition. Giving the audience information they need to understand what's happening, without just blurting it out and saying it. And I'm happy that in Jaws, the audience learns a lot from illustrations, flipping through the book with the horror photos of survivors of shark attacks, Dreyfus's lecture to the mayor by the poster when he describes what the shark does, the more conversational, quiet conversation at dinner. All of that is data that the audience needs to be truly afraid. It's like, if you're too stupid to be fearful, then you'll just be a victim and you won't appreciate what we're doing as storytellers. But if we tell you how dangerous or how serious or how awful this could be, then your identification with the humans in the story becomes that much more. So we tried to educate right inside the movie. We tried to educate people.
There was another hand there. Go ahead. You'll be our last one, I believe.
The question is, was there anything that was cut from the movie at that time because it was possibly too gory or shocking for the public then?
Yep.
What would that scene be?
There was two things. One was we were fighting for a PG rating, or I guess it was, in those days there was no PG. It was just there was just general and then R and then X. And we were trying to get a G rating for the picture. And the rating board objected to the severed leg floating through the frame. And it was a negotiation. Well, can we show the foot? Yes. Can we show the ankle and the knee? Yes. Can we show the thigh severed? Oh, I don't know. Can we show the thigh severed with blood and tendrils dripping, realistically? Well, no. Well, just a few frames. Okay, just a few frames. And the length of that shot was negotiated. It was gorier and it was longer in the shot, and it was shortened to just the point where we could get a G rating. There was also a shot of the Kintner boy being swallowed whole by the shark, and there was an effects shot where there's storyboards of it, of looking down at the Kintner boy in the raft and the jaws, the shark coming up in real size, just biting the kid in half and gulp, but that shot was never effectively made. The mechanical shark, couldn't risk a kid, couldn't the child act. So basically, what it turned into was a couple of prop men, special effects guys in wetsuits under the water, who would just reach up and pull the kid down, fire a blood cannon, and that became the effect. It was planned to be much gorier.
Well, we're almost out of time. Well, we are out of time. I'm just going to wrap up here. This always makes me laugh here. This meme, Brody overcoming his fear, hates the water, still does his job. I want to never stop applause, but they're a little premature on that. Anyone have any final thoughts that they want to share in the 30 seconds that we have?
I'm just going to do a shameless self-promotion plug. When we get through here, I'm going to go to the hall. I'm sitting between Flash Gordon and somebody from Star Trek. I have a table with copies of my books and photographs, which I'll be autographing and signing for compensation. Stop at the ATM machine, and I'll see you on the exposition floor. And it's a chance to buy my book, Jaws Log, which is the best-selling book about the making of a movie ever, thanks to all of you.
Thank you guys for coming, and again, reminder, we have a screening tonight.